Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached, here to review the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. If you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over, for now, to my petition. I have a new petition for the under 1K sub tab. That'll be sent over to Susan. It is to give a new tab, hopefully, one day, to subscribe to YouTube content creators who have under 1,000 subscribers. Also, you can check out the rest of my links, which will lead you to my Patreon, PayPal, and so on and so forth. Alright, with that out of the way, shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. And with that, let's get into Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So, I did see the commercial for this movie and I thought, this looks okay, but it seems a little bit too comedic for my taste. And so I was seriously about to skip it, but then I saw a review of it from the Critical Drinker, and I was like, oh, this is actually being taken, this is actually really good apparently. So, I decided to check it out for myself, and of course, as always, I try to do it as objectively as I conceivably can do it. So, if I were to sum up this movie in a short way, I would say, just take Shang-Chi's martial arts, combine that with Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, its world-traveling capabilities, put those movies together, and then get a better writer. And then that's when you get Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, is the short summary of this movie. Seriously, it deals with time travel and multiverse stuff, as well as having a lot of martial arts. It combines those two elements together. Family, a very generational type of movie. So, let's get into the plot, story, and all of the other good stuff within. So the movie starts with a very interesting shot held in a window, and we see sort of a karaoke setup or something. And we meet our main protagonist named Evelyn, or as I'll call her for short, Eve. She's holding on to the divorce papers, so she's getting divorced, or I believe he was setting up the divorce of. I don't exactly remember who was setting up the divorce, but just keep in mind that there is a divorce happening between the main couple in this movie. And they work at a laundry shop, and they also live above it. So, their daughter, named... I wrote it somewhere in my notes. But nonetheless, I'll just continue onward. She brings over her girlfriend, Becky. And as Eve works her way down, we begin to see a little bit of things, a little something going out of place while we see the cameras going a little wild. And during this little sequence, we see the father begin to move unlike he was doing before, so something very suspicious is already starting to happen, while Eve and everyone else seems to move along as they were normally doing. We see her watch a play, and after that they get called in. So the lot of them get into this large building. And during this sequence, when they get into the elevator, the husband begins to take out a lot of gear and brings up these little headpiece things. And once he is given one, he begins to explain how this all works, about how he came from another multiverse, as it were. And as she's going through this, she's going through, seeing her own past. And once the elevator opens, of course, the little time frame that he had to do this breaks. So now she's in on these weird things that are happening. And she starts to try to follow the instructions as intended. And she pushes the button, and she's brought back to him. And as he further explains, his world, his universe, is in trouble. And, you know, so, as we see, this older woman played by Jamie Lee Curtis, the one that was, like, giving them trouble while they were there, in the alternate universe, she has, like, this little circle marker, all the while, everyone is, like, getting ready after, like, they get out of there, and they begin to attack. Now, I believe the reason she gets upset after, like, they do their little thing is that based off of my notes, I'm going to assume he was the one getting ready to divorce, and then she found out pretty quickly. But this is where the other universe guy comes in, and he begins to fight. And again, this is where we see our first really good martial arts sequence, with him using his little fanny pack there. He begins to take them down, and of course they're now getting in trouble for trying to attempt to deal with this. Eve wants nothing to do with this, but she kind of gets pulled along anyway. All the while, we learn of this alternate world monster bad guy that eventually takes over the daughter of this world. This is where the husband's name, Raymond, that's right, that's what his name was. And so they insert the name Alpha, whatever, insert name here. So Alpha Raymond, as he likes to be called when he's the badass version of himself, is from an Alpha universe. And he begins to explain how 1,000 of her different versions of Eve have died from this bad guy monster named Wenwu, I believe it's called, or the main monster. And that's the Alphaverse is on their mission to try to stop this, and they are looking for an Eve that could break free from this potential badness going on. But he gets attacked from the Wenwu monster in wrestling form. Eve, in the process, gets called to, by him when he's trapped in another room. She begins to begins to do some odd flinging to try to bring herself into another universe and prepare, which actually does get her to eventually jump into one of these other universes and into a limo where she learns Kung Fu, and we actually see this path as she's going through it, what would have led her to this path, and as she's learning, it's like a continuum of a decision was made, and therefore a different set of variants happened within her timeline, and of course created that separate universe. And in that way, there's a really old movie, I think it's one of the earlier movies that did time travel kind of like this, The Butterfly Effect, with Ashton Kutcher. I know it's a really old callback. Or when the alternative thing happens, it shows a cutting of all the little things that changed in order for like some of the things to start making sense, and then there's still some other unanswered questions, but you kind of get a gist of what's going on. I actually do prefer this kind of style of like, okay, you can kind of follow like how they would get there, rather than just jumping to another world like, say, Doctor Strange, and then it's just kind of boring. So there's already that on top of this. So she begins fighting back, of course, now with this new ability. Let's see. But it is explained to her, if she were to stay in another world, that she could die from being in the jump. Now this is another one where I actually do enjoy this interpretation of the multiverse jump here as well. They don't make it like Multiverse of Madness, where if you're in another world, both worlds die. And I don't know, that doesn't just, it doesn't even sound right. Like, why would an entire world die just because you were in another world? Even if there is another you there, it doesn't seem like that follows, even in explanation. It seems like, again, based off of this world and how it explains itself, it would seem to be that there are other worlds and where other people all make all different types of variant choices, and if you go to another world, you are more likely to die, but the rest of the world that has made all of its alternative decisions kind of just keeps going, which would be in line with, well, yeah, there are still other people making different decisions from the one you made. Just because you decided to jump there doesn't mean you're going to destroy their entire world. That doesn't really fit, does it? No. Now that you actually think about it in a logical way of rule making. So yeah. He begins to explain it some more, so we have some more, exposition about that. But Wenwu, the bad guy, shows that she can break the rules from bringing things from other worlds more effortlessly than our main character currently can. This is where Eve, out of desperation, does something. I don't really remember how she does this, what she does to bring herself into this world, but she brings herself into a world that, from all of a sudden, she has long hands, and this is what happens when it transfers backwards in time, like they explain, like, in the little car that, in the Alpha universe, of like, oh, she's in a new world, like, one that we didn't even spot, and then it goes all the way back in time to where, like, the primates were doing their caveman stuff, and then it showed an ape with big, long hands beating, like, the natural evolution ape, and being like, now I'm the dominant one, and this is how we evolved from that. So it went all the way back there, and then scanned us all the way back to a relative world, new world, of just, we have long hands now. That's so much more creative. Like, it's so stupid, but I kind of love it for, they're embracing it. They're embracing, like, yeah, there are going to be other worlds where things are kind of bonkers. And, like, what? Doctor Strange has, like, the one time where they go through the various other worlds, and they're, like, there's two short ones that are really fascinating of, like, oh, they're animated now, and oh, they're in color now. But it's like, over with that. And here, we're actually seeing the worlds, we're actually exploring them, we're actually seeing characters interact in these worlds a little bit longer than that. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie has a montage as well, but we're still exploring more worlds, which is, again, what I thought Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was originally supposed to be. It was, like, yeah, really exploring a variant of number of worlds, and really just getting a little goofy. Like, just embrace that that's what you had, and the other movie didn't even do it that well. So she sees this white room, this sort of end of the world room, if I'm gonna call it something. And our main villain, Wenwu, talks about how pain and guilt had caused her to create, and this is what it is, a Bagel World. And within this Bagel World, like, the essence of everything everywhere else is contained within the bagel, which is, you kind of get lost just sort of looking at it because of its black voidy nature. But luckily, she gets saved by Alphagon, her father. Her husband, Raymond, explains, or Alpha Raymond, explains that the reason why she was, quote-unquote, the sort of destined one was actually because she was the worst of them. And from being of, quote-unquote, the worst of them, she now had, from that position, the most amount of potential, the most amount to be something. And there is a lot to be said about that, of like, yeah, quite literally, the less you have, the more you're able to make something from, well, nothing, or, you know, bad, a lot of bad. As one could say, when you're all the way down, the only other direction you can go is up, which is a simple way of looking at it, but, you know, you don't necessarily need to always go up. And in this case, this movie's like, yeah, it can go a little bit diagonal, well, you know, it just, as long as you're moving in an upward direction in your life, it doesn't necessarily have to be straight up. So, you know, a little bit of wiggle room there. Alright, so, she's now trying to explain to the daughter, who is now not possessed, and normal Rayman, of their situation pretty poorly, bringing up a world of where, like, raccoons live on their heads, and they miscommunicate that to being like Ratatouille or something. But Alphagon sees the potential of Eve going this far and breaking the limits to be too much. So he wants to deal with her now. And he grabs these other jumpers from other worlds to engross in the attack. Excuse me. So she goes into fighting these other individuals. So we have quite a number of fights back to back where she's fighting a group, then she fights like this dog lady. She fights with another guy with these two sticks, like 3 consistent fights. So this movie already has more fights than Shang-Chi, like martial arts fights that are just really good to see. And then we have 2 more men that come after the 2-stick guy, and one of them is not wearing pants. Nonetheless, this is where she obtains the Pinky skills, where she does something where she thinks about, like, a world where she did push-ups with her pinkies, and of course there was a world where she did that. And she's able to push them away, and she's about to deal with Wenwu, but she vomits and proceeds to die, quote-unquote. But in the process of dying, she ends up jumping back into one of her other former selves that was still alive, which was the one from the movie era. So she has the ability now to sort of break free from that. where we're seeing more worlds intervening with other worlds. This is where part 2 comes in, the everywhere part. So Wenwu is trying to follow her, and she attempts to punch her own daughter, but they go through this, like, escalation of, like, all these other variants that they could have conceivably have through. It almost seems like it equated to nothing relative to it being almost everything as well. This is where she gets pulled back into the white world, the ending world where the bagel is. So now Eve is here with her daughter, her evil version of the daughter with the Bagel World. And this is where she gets conceivably stronger, combining, or I wouldn't say combining, but almost like accessing her different versions of her otherworldly parts that are still alive, and beginning to move them, and them sort of, like, when she's affected, her other worlds of her are effective to a degree. So she's, like, going to a rock world, and then, rock as in a boulder. They are literally both boulders, rocks, literal rocks, and all you see is text. Like, you have to have some real crazy ideas if you have an entire little segment where there's just 2 rocks and all you see is text going back and forth between their communication, and that's the entire segment. But we see them eventually get back to the Bagel World, though, after their little rock communications. She eventually brings herself back to the spot of where she died, where the other jumpers are still kind of waiting. Eve is, like, you know, trying to make sure that all this is, like, trying to get it all under control. But unfortunately, Wenwu brings the Bagel Worlds to their world. And all the other things are from this world are being pulled into the Bagel World. And thus she's able to, again, from this first world, bring in from all, you know, think of all the other worlds she's sort of gotten glimpses of. And as they are all firing at her, she then changes one of the objects, or the bullet, into the googly eyeball, which you likely have seen in the trailer. This is where she learns her ultimate technique of being able to openly pull something from any other version of any other world and bring it to that person if they are inhabited of any other world. And that is how she's able to break through all the other minions that have that were on sort of Wenwu's side here. She's able to move more freely, closer. She gets joined by her father, and she deals with her father's turmoil with him. She eventually gets to the daughter, and realizes that her daughter is in a broken state, and the daughter wants to simply just be let go. But the mother says, no, not quite. That to pull you back in, but to give you enough space is sort of ultimately where we end up in this situation, which leads to the ultimate ending hug. So sort of a talk no jutsu, I suppose. Thus we cut to the airport, and then we get back to sort of where we initiated, or close to where we initiated the movie, where she's thinking about all these other worlds, and then she gets interrupted by the tax lady that where she was like initially turned on, and that was Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I must say, I know a little bit of my explanation is a little bit off. There are other scenes that I couldn't even write here, like when they were like breaking through other segments of other worlds, just two of them that I forgot to, in their placements. There's a world where they're both pinatas very briefly. There's another world where they're animated, much like in Doctor Strange, but they actually do something in that world instead of just flying through it. So there's already more creativity here in that regard as well. So yeah, dealing with a main character who is going through essentially a midlife crisis, with the husband feeling underwhelming, wanting a divorce. We have the daughter feeling empty, and she's trying to do that one, like insert like I'm trying to be accepted into your life and it's sort of beyond my way sort of deal is her whole shtick. Her father, Eve's father, that being, is even more disciplined, even more strict, even more stick to the guidelines, and we see this sort of again evolution of like family of like the top end of the string is the strictest, and then you have Eve, who is still strict to a degree, and then we have someone who is the quote-unquote most free, but is within that freeness still the most broken of the three. And that brokenness also comes from her age and inexperience as well. So, as if it wasn't very clear outside of the descriptor and a little bit confusion in the explanation of the story and plot, I really, really enjoyed this movie. It's really, really good. I would dare say it's one of the best movies I think I've ever seen. It's just so damn well written, so funny, so character-driven. Got even a little bit of emotion at the end here, there. I got a little bit like, I feel that through the acting and writing combined. It's not just the actors are trying to, build off of something that's like shit written. This actually has talent behind it, which is so rare. It is so fucking rare to have a movie that has such solid writing. It's paying attention to one of the key elements. The key elements to building any good movie is right here. Build your characters first. This movie built its characters very explicitly. And let's not even say these characters are all that complicated. They're not that complicated, but they're still well written. That's what's important. They're well written enough. They each have their own flaws, obviously. And their flaws aren't complicated, but they're there, they're present, and they're needing to work on those things. And that's really all you need. Like, I'm so shocked at how many movies miss the mark because they just miss this basic element of, like, when we look at a movie, at a story, we're looking for a character arc, specifically in this instance. We're looking for a character who has flaws, who isn't perfect, who has to go through ordeals and significantly learn something from doing something instead of just, oh, I'm good at it, or I was just born good at it, and just, it doesn't matter if it's that. It really doesn't. I mean, I'll give credit that there are some stories that aren't necessarily character arc driven, that are, like, the character's pretty consistent, but that still is elevated by the writing has to be even stronger, I almost feel like, or just, it has to, like, the character has to be, like, really significant if you're gonna keep them what I like to call a stagnant character. A well-written stagnant character again, isn't easy to achieve at all. I'm not saying that. In fact, I would, again, say it's harder to do that than one with a character arc. One with a character arc, to me, at least, personally, feels a lot easier, but in terms of execution, it's just so rarely done, so I really appreciate this movie in this regard. Its execution is so well done. I'm trying to fill in any mistakes or plot holes or anything of that nature, and I really did fall short on that. I really didn't think of, like, oh, where this movie could have been improved. I just found myself being solidly not only entertained, but, like, thinking about the movie, thinking about these characters, being like, oh, I kind of want these characters to all end up in a better place than where they were originally. So with that, it has been a long time, but it's finally time to give my second 10 out of 10. I have not given a 10 out of 10 to a movie since Joker. It has been a long time since I've given a movie a 10 out of 10, but as of currently, I'm giving Everything Everywhere All at Once a 10 out of 10, and if you have not seen this movie, then obviously I highly recommend it. It is just that damn good. And again, if you ended up enjoying my full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, in my description, the first thing in there will be my petition to get under 1,000 subscriber content creators their own tab that everyone can see. And they can be seen everywhere on the YouTube once that's done. And if we can get people to sign the petition all at once, then maybe we can send it to Susan Faster, the CEO of YouTube, and once we do that and get the change done necessary, then we can live in a better YouTube. Then YouTube can have its biggest character arc ever to date, and become the 10 out of 10 YouTube it had never the right to be, but I'm trying to help it to be. Other links in the description also include, obviously, my Patreon and PayPal, as well as my Discord. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye!